I think it's not our fault, right? That the things around us are so unsustainable. But I think it also behooves us to put in the effort to create a new sustainable solutions for our world. And so that's what drives me. I think I was also attracted to materials because it's just hard and underfunded. And people really like edible materials. Food is a big deal, but I think durable materials has been consistently underfunded, but it's a massive polluter, a massive emitter, and also has a lot of externalities. And those problems inspired me.
Welcome to this week's episode of Leaders on a Mission, where I'm joined by inspiring leaders driven by the impact of creating a healthy and sustainable world. Now, in today's episode, I'm joined by Mitchell Duffy, CEO and co-founder of Cambrium Materials. Now, Cambrium Materials are a mission-driven startup, really bringing novel molecules to life through a technology platform combining biology and machine learning. And essentially, I suppose, creating, bioavailable materials to help wean the world off its dependency on toxic petrochemicals. So I know this kind of mission runs right through the heart of you and the company. So, Mitchell, I know you're busy running around the world and, busy as a CEO founder, but I really appreciate your time, taking the time to come on the show today.
Yeah, it's great to be here, and thanks for the invite. Thanks for taking the time to hang out with me and talk a little bit about Cambrium and our mission.
Yeah, that's great, actually. But just before we get on to the mission, though, when I think about, you and taking you back a little bit, and I'm thinking about some of the major influences on you, as you sit here now, at this stage of life and the juncture of life, as it were. What's been responsible for getting you here?
Big question. I would say, ever since I've been a kid, I've been very interested in biology. I always knew that was something that I would want to study. And I think that I've had a number of teachers, as well as my parents, who both early on were biologists and ended up doing very different things than I was doing. But I think that just generally nature has been something that has driven me and interested me ever since I was small. And I get to continue to marvel at it today, and even try to harness it for human ends. And so that's really cool to see. Other things, I would say, I had a roommate during college who brought me toward computer science and informatics, and I'm really thankful for that, because I think it's been another lens with which to view nature. And it's been something that I was very interested in for a long time during my studies. So I think that was definitely a driving force. And finally, I think something that really changed the course for me, I was looking for different positions during the end of my PhD. And I was approached by Entrepreneur First. I had always wanted to start a company at someday, right? It was on the bucket list, but I had no idea where to begin. And Entrepreneur First pitched themselves as, we take PhDs and turn them into people who can start companies. And I said, okay, why not? This sounds great. So I think that was also a pivotal time and a driving force that then ended up leading us here today. I didn't end up founding together with Entrepreneur First, but it was definitely something that pivoted my life, so to say.
Opened your eyes up as well, right? To the possibilities. Oh, that's great. No, thank you for that. And I was going to say, when you're really interested in science and biology, there's different routes to go on. So when you were doing your PhD, did you always want to apply that? Had the thought of always the entrepreneurial kind of urge, as it were, was that always there? Or did you think you were going to go down maybe a more research kind of catered, route to start with?
I think to start with, I thought I was going to go down the research track. When I kicked off my PhD, it became pretty clear to me pretty quickly that that was not actually going to be the way to go. But I powered through the PhD anyway, and said, okay, on the other side of this, I'll figure out what the track is, and then ended up here.
And you founded Cambrium about just over 3 years ago, it looks like. Well, coming up to 3.5 years.
Yeah.
And you got a co-founder.
Yep, Charlie Cotton, yeah.
Charlie Cotton. Okay, so there's two of you, essentially.
Yes, that's true.
Just looking at what stood you in, when you think about founding a company, CEO, so, your first CEO gig, co-founding a company, what did you do previously to that, kind of what experience did you kind of gain out there, which stood you instead for taking this big step?
My entire previous career and absolutely nothing at the same time. So I think up until that point, I had been a PhD researcher. So I had a good understanding, a good basis across a number of different disciplines within science, as well as within informatics. And I think that broad scope allowed me to be able to take on the broad scope that is being one of the two people that lead a company. There's a lot of different things that are thrown at you each day, and you got to put a lot of different disparate pieces of information together. But I certainly have learned a lot by working together with my coworkers and with the team. They've taught me a lot of the skills now that I use in order to be more and more effective as a leader. Because, of course, being a PhD researcher is a job, and I've had a number of different jobs before. But I hadn't had leadership training, or wasn't able to structure things as rigorously, or to think about them with that business lens on. And I think that's something that my coworkers have really helped to grow and to bring out in me. And I'm thankful to them for that.
Yeah, great. Absolutely. So tell us about Cambrium then, Cambrium Materials, and, really about the problems you're looking to solve.
Yeah. So we're called Cambrium, Cambrium.bio. We do make materials, but I just wanted to highlight that because there is another company with a similar name. And so important to make sure that we stick with Cambrium as the name. Yeah, thanks. So 23% of greenhouse gases come from materials. Materials basically come out of the ground or are taken from the bodies of animals and are on a one-way trip to the dump. And I think that there's a possibility for a more circular economy. I think one person's trash could be the input or the treasure for another person's process. And I'd like to see a move toward a more sustainable material world. I think it's not our fault, right, that the things around us are so unsustainable. But I think it also behooves us to put in the effort to create a new sustainable solutions for our world. And so that's what drives me. I think I was also attracted to materials because it's just hard and underfunded. And people really like edible materials. Food is a big deal, but I think durable materials has been consistently underfunded, but it's a massive polluter, a massive emitter, and also has a lot of externalities. And those problems inspired me.
Well, what kind of materials are you looking to produce?
So we've started by mainly looking to replace animal-derived materials. People are moving away from meat, right? More and more. And there's another side to the meat industry. When you slaughter a cow, let's say, there's a hide, there's bones, there's a bunch of offal that all needs to be utilized, because disposing of that as trash, so to say, would not be particularly economically viable. And so people have pretty much forever been using all parts of the animal. And in this particular case, I think there's a lot of subsidization of the market through the ability of the meat industry to find a buyer for its junk, its trash, right? So there's the tanneries that are making leather. There's the collagen production that you can see for everything from nutraceuticals to biomedical use cases. And I think that we have a really interesting lever to disrupt this industry because it operates on a very thin profit margin, about 4%. And yet this, side stream makes up to 10% of the total subsidization of the industry, and it could even be higher. So if it's 10, maybe even up to 20%, then if you can hit that 4% profit margin, you're going to drive up the prices and you're going to reduce consumption. I don't know if that was clear, but basically we've been working on replacing collagen and on some fashion use cases as well for materials.
I saw that your product is called, am I right in thinking is Novical, your product?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, what I was curious about was, are you using a lot of your either your PhD work or your doctoral kind of research kind of work, in order to, I suppose, from a technology viewpoint, but also an application viewpoint as well?
Yes, I guess it might be part of the answer. I actually was happy to be moving away from collagen when I finished my PhD, and then we came right back, right? So I think my PhD work, it was on collagen degrading enzymes in arthritis and looking at them with different novel bioimaging. And at the end of that, I was like, okay, I'm closing this chapter of my life. And then we went out into the market and we said, hey, we have this really cool platform that's going to be able to make whatever type of protein you want. And people said, hey, can I have some vegan collagen, please? And so I was like, okay, sure, let's do it. And it turns out it's a fantastic molecule. It has so many interesting uses, and it's used across a number of different materials. But it's also, 80% of our body. So 80% of the dry weight of our body. So that's pretty interesting stuff. And I'm happy to be back in it, working on some collagen.
Right. No, great. And so just tell me a little bit about this collagen thing, because clearly I see over the last few years, I see lots of nutraceuticals with collagen and anti-aging and anti-wrinkle, as it were. But it's purely derived from animal sources, essentially, right? So just tell me a little bit about how companies make collagen, traditionally.
Yeah. So collagen is generally created, as I said, with the byproducts of the slaughter of animals. The main sources are bovine, porcine, or marine, where marine is fish. And these are then often dried and milled and boiled in acid in order to extract it, and then run through different purification methods. And you're making soup fundamentally. I mean, what gives bone broth, for instance, its kind of mouthfeel is really just dissolved collagen or gelatin, which is basically unraveled collagen. So it's something that we interact with. It has a certain set of material properties, and people have used it for centuries and millennia in order to feed themselves, but also to create materials. It's the main constituent in your skin. So it's the main constituent in all animal skin. So there you also get hides, sinews, the things that drove the ancient and to some extent our modern world.
So your process, tell us a little bit about your technology and process, and then how you go around finding and creating this molecule.
Sure. So at Cambrium, our real focus is to make something that is more performant and more sustainable. And we looked at collagen for cosmetics and said, okay, people are basically taking this really big molecule and they're busting it up. That's really what they do. They need to make it small enough that it can interact really well with your skin in the cosmetics industry. And when we were looking at it, we said, okay, there are certain regions in this big molecule that are active, that are interesting, that have efficacy. And what people are really doing is it's almost like they're mining. It's like they have ore and they're trying to refine it to find those active bits. But you can only really do so much. And so in the end, you end up just kind of putting soup into your formulation and putting that on your face. And that is not the most effective way to go about it. You could instead of going from this kind of top-down approach, you could go from the bottom up and you could say, okay, what are those active regions? Let's just make them. And so we have a computational technology that can search through and find the most active regions that are also very easy to produce, because we need to be able to scale this right up to thousands and thousands of liters, and in order for it to be economically viable. And nobody cares about an economically non-viable solution, right? So we basically use this computational technology to find those, and then we go put that section into a yeast, and our yeast, similar to brewing beer, but instead of making alcohol, make this protein, and they make that particular subsegment that is super efficacious. We formulate that and deliver that to our customers.
Amazing, yeah. And tell me, finding that molecule, I mean, you talk about the computational. So this is a small molecule that we will produce, and it will be part of. So nature produces it.
Yeah.
But it's a small part, am I right in thinking, of the overall collagen molecule, as it were?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's true. Because the overall collagen molecule is very, very large. It would sit on the surface of your skin and not really interact with your cells. So it's not going to have that stimulating effect that you're looking for. That's going to increase the generation of your current collagens. That's going to downregulate those collagen breakdown enzymes that I studied in my PhD. Those are the kinds of effects that we want to have. That's the kind of efficaciousness that we want to bring. And in order to be able to do that, we need to deliver very specific sections of the collagen molecule.
So you will take a yeast and you will essentially program the yeast to produce this kind of active ingredient, as it were.
Yes.
And then put it into a kind of bioreactor and then scale it in liters, as it were.
Yeah.
Just like the beer brewing process, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And then you have to, what about afterwards? Do you have to purify it? Is there a complexity around the purification process?
Yeah, so you do need to purify it. We call it downstream processing, or DSP. What I always think about it as is a little bit like, if we follow this beer brewing or alcohol production analogy, it's the distillation step. If you wanted to make, some distillate, some liquor, or some schnapps, however you want to define it.
Great. So it's a real combination of this technology, this kind of AI, computer science, biology, all coming together, essentially.
Exactly. And I think that has been something that's really driven me over the past years, and something that I'm happy to work on every day at Cambrium.
And in terms of the application, obviously seriously exciting. So tell me a little bit more about where the company is on the journey to date, as it were, over the last whirlwind 3 years and 4 months, as it were.
Yeah, so I think we have gone from looking for what's going to be the first application to actually delivering not only industrial scale production, but also offtake. So we have customers that are willing to pay for it and are very excited to basically buy whatever we can produce. And that is the goal of a company. So that's really how I've been excited to measure success. And I think that we very recently found several investors who shared this philosophy and who were also excited by our success. We closed our seed round, and that was together with a number of investors in the US who were there to dream with us. And so now it's time to deliver on some dreams.
What was the amount you closed in your seed round?
8 million in the seed round. So that brings us up to 11 total investment.
11 total investment. That's great. So, which is a sizable investment for a seed stage company, right?
Yeah. I think it is pretty sizable, but it's also indicative of not only what it takes to bring such bio innovations to market, but is also, I think, indicative of the kind of commercial traction that we've seen. That we're not just like funding dreams here, but instead also producing products. And that's very important to me and was what we were focused on, like speed to revenue, speed to products on the market.
Yeah, it's a challenging marketplace to raise any kind of financing at the moment. So, congratulations on that. It certainly sounds like a really exciting time. And tell me a little bit about the mission. Like from here now, the mission and vision. When you look forward and you see the company over the next 5 to 10 years, what does that look like?
Yeah. So I think that the mission is going to continue to stay the same. We are focused on making materials that matter. And I think that we envision a future in which the vast majority of our physical inputs to our economy are going to be produced biologically. So the things that we eat, things that we wear, the things that we construct. And I'm really forever bullish on biology as the most advanced manufacturing technology on Earth.
But what about in scale, though? Because you always hear about, the challenges of production, or the challenges in scaling, and sometimes how expensive biology can be when compared to traditional petrochemical kind of means and methods. So what's the route to scale?
I think it's been a real focus on specialty chemicals. And it's been a real focus on what is that enabling bit that you need to produce that's going to get both performance and sustainability. We decided not to focus on creating, say, bulk polymers or to try to compete on those grounds because it's just so hard. And they already have scale, right? And you're going to have a hard time just from the very beginning with a seed funding of 8 million. You're not going to be able to compete with that. They have hundreds of times that just to build one plant. And they have many plants around the world. So I think it's about finding the right way to begin. And for us, the right way to begin was to focus on something where people needed this. They needed small amounts to begin with. They were willing to pay high prices for it. But it was an active need. And so that's really where we focus. And that's allowed us to scale to big scale for us, right? To commercial scale, tens of thousands of liters. But at the same time, we don't have to go all the way to building a plant to be cost competitive within a very short time. So we are able to compete, and we're able to compete by outperformance. So we are able to put in smaller amounts of our collagen and yet see greater effects. And that's really what we're focused on, is continuing to create similar products to that.
So performance, really what you're outlining there is a superior product. It's got superior characteristics with it.
Yes. And that's what most specialty chemicals companies are selling in the end. They're selling some performance benefit. Yes. And so we're looking to be the green specialty chemicals company powered by proteins and able to design new molecules for material property needs.
Yeah. Well, I suppose you're attracting consumers that aren't just buying it because of the vegan label. You're attracting individuals that might not be necessarily that bothered about that, but want a better performing product, right?
I think, you can target both, right? We're going to produce things that are both more sustainable and more performant. And if we can do that, then we can attract hopefully everybody. I mean, everybody wants performance, and everybody, or at least an increasing majority of people, are focused more and more on sustainability. And currently they have to compromise. And hopefully in the future with Cambrium, you will not have to do that anymore.
It sounds like a wonderful vision and mission. And are your customers at the moment, are they the actual manufacturers themselves, or the nutraceutical companies, or are you focused on kind of B2B markets that have a suite of ingredients that they might sell to the manufacturers?
So currently with Novacol, we are interacting directly with end brands that are looking for a more performant collagen solution. Actually, our first customers were convinced more by the performance And the fact that we were able to design something innovative that they couldn't get anywhere else in terms of it being 100% skin identical, than they were on the vegan label. They continue to sell traditional collagen as well. And if people are convinced by our product, hopefully we can transition them away from that in the future, right?
Yeah. Okay, great. But it's interesting. Are there plans to, over the years, individual companies that come to market, they really see quite a lot of the B2B2C marketplace where they want to showcase the technology through a small launch or a product to market directly to consumers. Is there a plan or an opportunity for you guys to go down that road?
So I think a B2B2C for me is something akin to, say, Intel or Vibram or Gore-Tex. And there I would be very excited for Cambrium to be that in the future. That is different than D2C, which I have also seen companies doing. And we don't have plans for that. I was speaking with several people who have been in the industry for a long time. They said, when you do this, basically, you're going to spend a lot of money on marketing. And as soon as you turn off that marketing tap, then revenue dries up with it. You do see some people launching these capsule collections, but you could do that together with a really great name who's also value aligned with you, right? So there's no real need to build up that competency in-house the way that I see it. The B2B2C is mainly done through contracts. So in the end, you're speaking with an end brand that wants to be able to use your brand as a USP for their end product. And so in the end, it's really about how do you structure that contract and that deal so that they will market your product for you. So I guess the marketing spend is more spend on someone who's a really great negotiator, and then spend on lawyers at that point. I'm overly simplifying massively, of course, but I think that that's a more scalable approach and something as well that would be really cool to be able to put the stamp of Cambrium on products and for people to interpret that as being both more performant, more sustainable.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you for that. And tell me, what's it like? How many people have you got in the company at the moment?
We are over 20, under 30.
Okay. Yeah. And tell me a little bit about why would someone come and work, for Cambrium, as it were? Tell me a little bit about the culture and about the work you've done in terms of building that and the team.
I think it's really about creating a vibrant environment. I think that takes people of many stripes, and it takes people from many different communities, nations, disciplines coming together to work together. And I think it also takes the right interaction between that, because that can either go really well or go awry. And I think that we've really focused in on finding people who are smart, but also hopefully humble as well. And really also looking into those who are comfortable with failing and then getting up and keeping on going, and uniting them behind a vision to make materials that matter.
Yeah. Is that something that's obvious when you interview and meet people, or do you have to take chances?
I think we have a way of de-risking this to a certain extent. But of course, you still take chances from time to time. And generally, we've been positively surprised. So that's great. But I think that our way of de-risking this is to work together for 2 days. We call it on-site days. And through that, we are able to understand what is it like working together, even in potentially a little bit stressful scenarios. And there, people tend to show their true colors. And also, we give them a lot of opportunity to interact with other members of the team in order to kind of go through this case study with us. And through that interaction with the team, not only, do our team members get to have exposure to that person, but they really get to understand what is it like working with, our head of finance and operations, or our head of business development, or our head of engineering, or any one of the other people within our organization, from strain engineers, or people who have been working on our special projects. So that's important to me, team integration.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And what's the ecosystem like, around kind of Berlin? That's where you're based, right?
That is, yeah, that is indeed. We're in Berlin, Germany, and the ecosystem. I mean, it's one of the larger European ecosystems for startups. I think in terms of biotech, it's a little bit lower, and especially for bioindustrials. There are a couple of us out here, and we all know each other and get together from time to time at our metabolic networking event, which is quite fun. But in general, I think it's something that could still grow. But there's very few, there's no real big central hub in Europe. So I think we're all kind of spread around Europe with a butter knife, and that has both its advantages and its disadvantages. We have to get together at conferences or go visit each other.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you see as the kind of disadvantages with the way the European ecosystem works?
Mm-hmm. I think that in terms of talent, like if you want to hire, people often need to move, right? And that can be difficult, or need to work remotely, even if they don't want to. Some people don't necessarily get as much energy from that. And so that, I guess, that could be disadvantages. And I think as well, in terms of investors, they can have different focuses. So for instance, there is a really good hub in Denmark, in Copenhagen especially. But like the Nordic investors tend to really focus their investments in the Nordics, and the Nordic companies have less of an interaction, say, with the rest of Europe. And I think that you're probably sitting somewhere in the UK, and I think that this has also kind of started to happen as well. So it makes us a little bit more fragmented, not only talent wise, but also investment wise, or learnings wise.
Interesting. I suppose the thing is, when you're really early and you're 20, 30 people, ideally, and you could choose, you would all be together, really, wouldn't you? If you could choose your ideal dynamic, because that would surely be a better way of integrating. But it's a challenge sometimes with locating talent pools that aren't based in the region, and people don't necessarily want to move these days, do they?
Yeah, I think that is true, and I think it can have pluses and minuses. But I think in terms of having everybody together, I think that would be nice, but I think it's a bit of a pipe dream, and we all instead need to live in the real world, where, for instance, our headquarter, quote unquote, is separated from our lab because there's really not much lab space at all in central Berlin. So we have a lab in Berlin-Buch. And then in the center, in Mitte, we have our business and our engineering functions. And of course, we visit each other, and we have events where we all get together, and we definitely see each other on Zoom all the time. But even if everybody's in the same city, there are still hindrances that can come up. And as you get bigger and bigger, I think it definitely is more and more of a loss to not have some way to be hybrid or remote. I mean, people have had international offices for years, right? And it has worked, and they've continued to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I suppose you can tap into a wider talent pools as well with that model and approach.
Yeah. We've really found that a lot of the candidates for more commercial roles are, especially in sales, they're like, I'm on the road a lot anyway, or I'm interacting with my customers on Zoom. I can do that from the office, but I can also do that from my house and take care of my kids. And I think that's great to be able to offer to people. It allows them to live in the place where they want to live. And as long as we still get to interact with them once a quarter in person, I think that's great.
Great. And you said at the beginning And right at the beginning of our conversation about the journey, the CEO journey over the last, 3.5 years. What do you think has been the biggest learning curve for you doing this for the first time?
I think communication and alignment is much harder than I thought. I did not understand the depth and the intricacies of that. And especially coming from the academic context, I have to say, I did not have the best role models in that regard. And really learning how to communicate well with people so that we're all aligned, and trying to notice when misalignments have happened, I think is something that I have been working on and learning throughout this journey, as you called it.
Yeah. And is that something that you actively improve by noticing more and being more aware? Or is it always a case of reflection and then looking at the case example, to learn? Like, how does one learn and get better at it?
I think you make a lot of mistakes.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, good communication, sometimes you'll hear about it, which is really nice, or you'll notice, oh man, everything feels really good at Cambrium right now, right? But you'll definitely really notice when something was poorly communicated, because 7 things start to go wrong all at the same time. Somebody's doing something different than what you had expected. You're surprised by the way that somebody reacts to something. You hear in a feedback session that you could improve on X, right? And so you get it from a lot of different sides. And most often, or more often than not, really, if I come back to it, it's either there was a process mess up or communication wasn't there. So.
Right. I would have thought having mentors or having an advisor or having someone to really bounce off, to learn with, would be really. Yep. Have you had people in your corner as advisors who you can go to?
Yeah, definitely. So we have a number of different advisors. I'm actually going to have a call with one of them tonight. I'll be on the phone with somebody that you've already had on your podcast, I saw when I was looking back. So he's great to interact with. And I was on the phone with one of our advisors this morning, and she's been super helpful as well, thinking about kind of some commercial direction for Cambrium. So it's a constant thing that you need to tend to, and you have to make time for it as well. I have like a little side sheet where I keep questions for the advisors, and I hope to utilize this more and more, because I think you often don't know what you don't know, but now I'm starting to see when it's useful.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. And just tell me that final question. You think about your hopes and dreams, right? Really now, what are your wildest hopes and dreams for the company?
Wildest hopes and dreams, a specialty chemicals company that I can feel proud to work for, and that we can put out new materials into the world that people are proud to use. And I would like to see a change in the way that we create materials. I'd like to see new innovative building blocks that we haven't seen before. And I'd like to see a push toward a more circular economy. So the inputs need to be looked at, the outputs need to be looked at much more rigorously. And I think we're only going to do that within the framework that we've set up over the last hundreds of years in terms of capitalism right now. And so we really need to look at how do we deliver value to people.
Yeah. Okay, no, great. And look, Mitchell, it's been great having you on. Thanks for sharing a little bit about the journey, about the company, and about your vision, mission, and where you're going. It's been a great discussion, and wish you all the very best.
Thanks for your time. It's really great to chat, and look forward to chatting again in the future.